But the goal has always been, and the baseline has always been ethically trained AI tools with a focus on the quality that music producers expect.
Welcome to AI Music Unmuted. Real Talk by realmusic.ai, the show that talks to experts and thought leaders about tools and truths for musicians in the age of technology and creativity.
Today's guest is Kyle Billings, musician and head of audio at Kits.ai.
So welcome, Kyle.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It's great to be here.
So let's start with you, your background, and how it's led you to where you are today, and what you're doing professionally.
Sure. My name is Kyle Billings. I'm the head of audio at Kits.ai. My background largely starts at Berklee College of Music, where I did my undergrad. Upon graduation from Berklee, moved out to San Francisco and started working in tech, specifically in design. My career kind of came back together once I started working with Kits, where I had this background in music, of course, but then as well a background in tech that I developed over time. Kits became this opportunity to bring both of those sides together. So I feel great to be in a position where I've spent a lot of my life in the world of music and also in the world of tech. So it's a really great Venn diagram, and I feel really lucky to be here.
I studied music industry, and people always said to me, you can get a degree in music industry and now music tech as a degree as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how it's changed at Berklee even down to when I was studying there, you needed to play an instrument to get in. But now they've opened it up, and so new people can go to Berklee either making music with a DAW or I believe even just being really interested in music tech. I think that's a growing part of what Berklee's focused on.
You brought up Kits. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are building, problems you're solving, and why it's important.
Sure. Yeah, the focus at Kits.ai has really always been ethically trained AI tools for serious music producers. So we started in voice conversion technology about the same time when the song "Heart on My Sleeve" came out, which was like a really shocking moment for the music industry. At about the time that song was released, Kits was releasing its first, I suppose you could say, licensed voice models, so voice models that you could use that were trained on data that had been licensed from vocalists. So very early on, we became a tool for music producers to add to the palette of their productions, specifically with voice. Since then, we've released a number of tools, like AI mastering. We have some tools that are coming up around that are more generative in nature. But the goal has always been, and the baseline has always been, ethically trained AI tools with a focus on the quality that music producers expect.
And what do you think when you think about AI and ethics? What does that mean to you?
Sure. Yeah. I think that AI is absolutely a growing part of the creative process. And even for myself, for a lot of music producers that I speak with, these generative tools make it so much easier to get unstuck. I think that being able to go to a site and type in kind of generally what you're thinking about doing, and then getting a palette of ideas to choose from is a super powerful value proposition, and it's an opportunity for a lot of music producers creatively, so I should say. But that comes, of course, with its ethical questions. I think that it's a really interesting question to think about from the producer side, as well as the I suppose you could say the AI developer side, which is where obviously Kits is. From the producer side, we're faced with a lot of the same sorts of ethical questions. And I think a big one of those is attribution. We demand a lot as musicians from companies to be very transparent and to be ethical with where they're sourcing their data. And I think that the idea of creativity and kind of the unlocks that a producer has access to now with AI brings up some of those same questions where maybe in the past I would never consider disclosing that I used a preset in a synthesizer in Sierra, for example. But on the other side of that, I would maybe be, for example, the copyright office recommends that you disclose whether AI produced any part of your song. So there really becomes this sort of trade-off that comes with using these tools as a way to speed up creativity, but then being faced with this same kind of question, should I disclose that I generated a song, but then remade the entire thing? should I disclose that I generated a sample that then I played using a simpler in Ableton Live? Should I disclose that I generated a vinyl scratch kind of texture and just added that to a specific part of the song? The line is kind of shifting, and I think that's what makes it a really interesting conversation, the topic of AI creativity and how the two weave together.
Yeah, and we talk about a line, but it's really a spectrum. So that's what makes it a bit challenging. And you also brought up speeding up creativity, but I often think about it as enhancing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's absolutely a spectrum because I think it's not it's not something that's going to be clear, and it's not something that's going to be the same for everybody or every use case. There's some interesting examples I think that we've all experienced now. So there's Peter Jackson working with the Beatles to release the song Now and Then, where the main use case was upscaling a recording in order to produce the song around that, release it. That was a really wonderful use of AI, and I think that we all can agree that that sort of use case is really wonderful. But at the same time, you think about what those tools that they used were trained on. If you think about where that data came from, I think in that use case where the use itself is allowing people to go deeper into a catalog that is really meaningful to them, that's that's an area where maybe that line shifts, and maybe we begin to be a little bit more okay with what those tools were that were used to produce that song. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have Drake releasing his tailor made freestyle, which used an AI voice of Tupac, and that was obviously not received very well. So you can also look at an example like "Hard on My Sleeve," which obviously was a shocking moment for the industry, but it also showed everyone kind of the capacities of this technology. That obviously people were a bit intimidated by that, but then it was also nominated for awards. So that's maybe on one part of the spectrum. But then as well, you have Willonius using Udio to generate a sample for BBL Drizzy, which was more of like this, wow, look at how creativity has been opened up for an entire new category of people to kind of join in the musical conversation. And maybe that's a little bit closer to the Now and Then project on the spectrum. So you're right. It's really interesting that it's not a clear line that moves all the time. And it really has to be an ongoing conversation.
What's the difference between legal attribution and artistic credit? How should the industry be handling this issue?
It's a really interesting question. I think, the legal attribution side, there are recommendations at this point. I think there's implications. I believe in the European copyright system, if you've generated a song using a generative AI tool, you cannot copyright that. You can only copyright the part of the song that was human created. And so that again brings back that question of disclosing whether you've used AI to not to create that song. But at the same time, it's like the crediting element and understanding like how you can credit and when it makes sense to credit and how you even know who to credit is an interesting and evolving question as well. Especially with those models like a Suno or a Udio that have perhaps grabbed from so many different sources that it really becomes difficult to say where and who is most used, like more most accessed in that model. And I like that idea of trying to figure out to what extent each artist kind of in the training data set has contributed to whatever the output is. But I think on a technical level, that's certainly a challenge. And that has also influenced how Kits has approached vocal models, for example, where we've gone to, if we have a specific voice on the site, like that was a fine-tuned model. That was a model we fine-tuned on a specific singer. And that means that we have a specific person that we work with for each one of these models. If you go on the site and you select a royalty-free model to use for one of your projects, the vocalist behind that voice has been compensated for that. And there's an agreement in place where that vocalist can also leave the platform if they'd like to. So we try to make sure that in structuring the tools on the site, we do make it possible to give that in a way that artistic credit through remuneration for that artist. But as well, we just try to simplify it in order to make it possible for that attribution to happen.
Yeah, share with me more, thoughts you have around transparency. That's, I think, at the heart of a lot of what you guys are working on, and I'm sure you have some personal and professional thoughts on it.
Yeah, transparency. And again, I draw from my own background here in music, where I think the version of this that I've always wanted to see exist is a version of it that is for artists by artists. I think the follow up question there is, what does that look like and what does that mean? Like transparency, especially for us in sharing kind of where we've sourced our data from. And if you go on the Kits.ai/research, we've done some write ups about where our data does come from. I think that's important because trust is hard to pin down exactly what this does especially in the AI industry. But trust, I believe, as a music tool is essential because so much of what we're doing, if people use our tool to release music, we really want them to be able to trust us as a platform and having done the right thing so that they don't feel that down the line someone will come after them saying like, hey, no, you've infringed upon my works by using these tools. If we can establish that trust and we can keep that trust by being transparent, we believe that we can be that trustworthy tool that music producers are willing to use on a long-term basis and in increasingly larger projects, which I think is really key for the industry at large. You want to be able to say, hey, this one song that went viral, this one song that got a placement in this film used our tools. And they were able to do that because it was all built on the trust that is then based on the transparency that we provide.
It's interesting you talk about trust because trust is something you have to earn over time. And, most companies working in the space are fast moving startups. They got a certain amount of money. They got to move quickly, try to figure out how to balance the rapid growth over the responsibility. How do you think companies should be able to scale quickly, but also build on ethical foundations?
It's a challenging question because when you're an AI company and you look at some of the models that are created as a result of trading on this data, it seems at a glance like it's very easy to kind of cover your tracks, and that can feel very tempting for people who are creating their first models. I think there's another obvious pressure, which is, to your point, like the pressure to move quickly. And how do you move quickly and build a really impressive model? Well, that just means as getting as much data as you can. Um, the hard part, and I recognize how challenging it is, but you have to find these ways to limit your data needs, architectural decisions that we can make to limit the amount of data that is required so that we can feasibly license all of it is a big part of what we've had to do on the research side. And that's been true since the beginning. It continues to be true. It's harder to do, but I can say that you come up with some very interesting workarounds and some very interesting solutions. And I think that's exactly what we've done, where we could take a very, very similar diffusion-based approach to generative audio, where we plug as much data as possible as we can into this in order to get something out that sounds like singing or sounds like music. Or we could try to adjust how we think about it, and in doing so, maybe move a little bit further away from those techniques, and in doing that, come up with a result that sounds better in some other way. And in that way, we're both targeting the needs of music producers who want something that's really high fidelity, want really good articulation, want it to be very controllable. We can respect that while also respecting the data use, I guess, limitations or data use question in a way that's also artist centric. So to bring it back, if you're on an accelerated timeline, I think in a way that while it seems very tempting to go out and grab as much data from anywhere as you can, thinking about how to optimize for quality in, quality out, smaller, more targeted models could be a really compelling way to create something new, without having to take the same path that other startups have taken.
People say that voice is the most personal instrument, right? Everyone has one. Should AI voice licensing be treated more like, say, sample packs? Or does the industry need an entirely new framework? I mean, the snare drum, you can arguably say it's not as personal as somebody's voice, not tied directly to the creator.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We started when Kits was first started, when we were releasing our first voice models, it was actually because we had relationships with them from the time when we were a sample pack marketplace. So the transition from sample pack, here are my drum sounds, here's my piano sounds, my chord structures, like here's how you can sound like me, that very, very easily transitioned into here's how you can sing like me. And that's a really interesting value proposition. But it's true. We've definitely had to figure out what the best way to structure these deals and to structure attribution. Um, Early on, we had a number of voices that were kind of like Grimes did, kind of put her voice out and said, "Hey, you can use my voice. These are the splits that you have to agree to in order to use my voice." We very early on tried something very similar, and it was alongside these sort of licensed attribution splits based voice models that we launched the royalty free ones, which had more of an anonymous face to them. Like we branded them as like, this is a rock voice, this is a jazz voice. Very similar deals, but we found that some vocalists are interested in something like that, where they want their own artistry to continue to exist separate from their AI voice model, which they're in these cases happy to have out there for other people to use. And so I think that this is still something that can continue to evolve. For the time being, it works for a lot of vocalists to be remunerated for the use of their voice as a creative tool, as like part of the toolkit for another producer. And I think that that absolutely will evolve over time, and we love to be at the forefront of any new licensing structures that come out of that.
Tell me a little bit about Kits Earn and how that works.
One case study that we can take is my own voice, which is on the Kits Earn page. I did it because I wanted to experience what it was like to do exactly that. My voice is actually branded as me, like because I wanted to have sort of the full on experience of what is it like for people out there to have access to my singing voice. And it's really kind of fulfilling. It's really interesting. I think that knowing that people are using my voice, and I haven't listened to too many of the examples. I certainly have listened to some, but it's just like an interesting experience. I feel like the kind of music that I make in total is not something that can be recreated using just my voice model. So I feel comfortable with it being out there. But then it's also really cool to just receive royalties when people use it, um, because as a musician, and I'm sure it is the case for many musicians, having additional revenue streams is a is a great win. And again, having the option at any time that I want to be able to take that voice down if I at any point don't want it to be used anymore, that's great. That's comforting. Knowing that there is a record of every use of that voice, and knowing that I can track down any conversion that has been made using my voice, to be able to verify that it was not me. That's also comforting. So there's a lot of tools and a lot of infrastructure in place to make sure that I'm safe as a singer, but that I also can benefit from it.
Most successful music careers now have a half a dozen revenue streams, and
Mhm.
it's nice when you can add one that's not just selling T-shirts.
Right.
But looking ahead, what excites you most about AI? And let's stay on the vocal track here. What safeguards do you think the industry still needs, and what gets you excited?
Safeguards are essential for voice models. I think that like Kits has records of all the conversions that are happening with a specific voice model, and having that paper trail is really essential. But I think and I think it's already at the point where somebody can hear a voice clone and really not be able to distinguish it from the original speaker. And I think that's been true for a while in terms of the fidelity of these models. Um, but I think that also means that some sort of watermarking solution is important for these sorts of things. Um, at the same time, like this kind of voice conversion technology, I think is available in a lot of different areas from a lot of different sites where you can kind of run these tools on your own. And so this kind of watermarking feature could certainly identify voices from the kit side, but I think that we really do need to think about how in general are we able to differentiate between real and cloned in a world where people have cloning technology all over the place, and there would be theoretically easy ways to get around that watermarking. So I think that's sort of safeguarding and making sure that people still continue to understand what's real and what's not is an ongoing question, and again, a question that we think a lot about. Um, what gets me excited, specifically on the voice side, is being able to control these conversions in ways that we haven't been able to before. So we think about combining ideas of vocal cloning with vocal synthesis, where we have more control over the inflection or the pitch, the general style, the breathiness, the grit of a voice. Being able to work with those in really intuitive ways is really exciting technologically. That's an area that we think about as well. Is how can we give producers the opportunity to maybe control a voice with a scratch vocal that they've recorded, but then really dig in and be able to like create the the best take that they can with that voice model by being able to control things like emotion with in the same way that you'd automate volume in a DAW, and being able to open up controllability in that way, even for myself as a singer, being able to put my own voice model in there and access parts of my voice that I'm not personally able to access very easily would be incredible for me as a vocalist. And that as just part of a creative suite of tools for users to be able to, manipulate voice in ways that they haven't been able to before feels really exciting.
So when you use the word areas you're not able to access, is it fair to say that you're able to generate techniques that your voice without the assistance cannot do?
Yeah, exactly. There's certain singing techniques that I've just not mastered. Um, false chords, false fry. These kind of rock singing techniques that I've always been really interested in and have loved the sound of. I can't seem to do it. And that's something that I'd be really interested to sort of hear. Like what does my voice sound like when I'm able to you know, really support it and put that grit into it that I've kind of always wanted to hear. And maybe that'd be something that would help me actually accomplish that. Just by hearing what it would sound like, that would get me even more excited about it or something.
Do you
Um,
think that hearing your voice do something that you can't quite do yet can help you learn that? In some cases, you might never build that technique, but is there an opportunity where AI can, by listening to it, help you and educate you to be able to accomplish things you couldn't before?
I think absolutely. In fact, we have quite a few vocalists on the Kits site who have done exactly that, where they've created a voice model for themselves, and then by putting in interesting inputs into that, they can sort of hear their voice with a different vibrato technique, or they can hear it hitting notes that maybe they're not comfortable hitting otherwise, in different registers that they're not really comfortable using. And that's exactly what they do. They listen to themselves, and that pushes them to try to emulate that. And it's really, I think, it's to see that it's being used as this kind of autodidact, self-learning tool.
Kyle, great insights. Where can listeners learn more about Kits?
I think Kits.ai would really be the best place to do so. So head on over to the site, give it a try, and have fun.
And who do you think it's for?
Obviously for vocalists, obviously for music producers who like to sing, but increasingly it's becoming usable for any music producers who just want to be able to play with vocal textures, whether through generative or synthesized methods. Keep an eye on Kits for some new tools that should be coming up very soon, where you can utilize a voice model without ever singing a note. And this should be really exciting for people who want to hear themselves sing, want to be able to release songs with vocal hooks. Um, Again, yeah, keep an eye on it. Lots of really cool tools coming soon.
All right, Kyle. Well, I like what you guys are doing, keeping things ethical and human centric, keeping the musician alive and being enhanced by the technology. All right, everyone, check out realmusic.ai for more music resources. Please like, comment, subscribe. Let's go make some music.
All
All right,
right.
bye, everyone.
See ya.